Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor Greg Dooley and the pundit Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
It's the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark. We're presented by Nick Hopwood, who's a certified financial planner, founder, and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence. We highly recommend going to Nick's website at peakwm.com for all your financial needs. And today, Michigan's Big Ten Conference winning streak is still alive at 26 games. It's Jug Week. Somehow the Michigan game had contenders for being the game of the week. But first, the roller coaster win versus USC, the media darlings of the first 3 weeks of college football.
Never a doubt. Am I right? Never a doubt. Never a doubt? Well, okay, a lot of doubt. A ton of doubt. You're listening to this. You know what I'm talking about. But we won. Victory, Steve. The unique nature of this historic win. When it seemed out of reach, we talked about it last night at Oscars. It felt like 2. And these first few weeks, we'll never forget this. And I feel like we've been spoiled with wins, Steve, that many of us did not think we had a chance in this game. And we pull it out. We're going to enjoy this one today. Okay, we have a lot of questions about this team, but we are going to enjoy this precious win.
The probability of winning that game with 4 minutes left. So here's the situation. It's 4:02 left when Michigan has the football. You have 9 yards of total offense through 5 drives in the second half. Then the Trojan defense had Michigan completely shut down.
I was watching. I cannot remember that drive and the drive before feeling less confident that we could move the ball. Felt helpless, hapless. And I wonder if there's some people out there who threw their remote control and turned it off.
Well, I know
it seemed like no chance that we could mount a big drive.
I did notice after the first couple plays that people were leaving, and you could hear the boos because they went to the running game off the first play from their, their own 8-yard line or something like that. The ESPN probability chart had it at 92.9. That's 1 in 14 chance of Michigan coming back. Boy, it seemed like it should have been higher than 1 in 14. It just seemed so improbable. Look, the Trojans had allowed just 4 plays of more than 20 yards in their first 2 games. Michigan gashed them 3 times for over 40. Danton Lynn's defense at USC had allowed just 1 rushing yard on 3rd and 4th down the entire season. Khalil Mulling's big run of 63 yards was on 3rd down late in the game.
I mean, is there anything more smash than a linebacker converted to a running back who is literally named after Superman, if you know it? And some of you are like, what are you talking about? He's Kal-El. He's son of Jor-El. That's from the comic book lore. That is why he's named that. He put up an all-timer, and on that run, which people are playing all over the place, did you see how far he dragged? I think it was a linebacker or one of the DBs. Yep. He dragged him like 10 yards. And before the guy got let off, Steve, I've had shorter Uber trips in my day, okay? The guy went for a ride. And some of you know on mvictors.com, we have a historic calendar of great birthdays and historic games and moments. I think this and his performance made the calendar, Steve.
It was incredible. And I'm curious now if Mullings becomes RB1. Not the same way Blake Corum was RB1 in 2023, but when the game is on the line, is it going to be Mullings in there for now on? Somebody asked the question last night, did Donovan Edwards even see the field again after the fumble midway through the fourth quarter?
I think it was me. Go ahead. Somebody.
It was somebody. It was you. It was my podcast partner. Oh, okay. No stats with Donovan Edwards there, and so I wonder if the tide has changed a bit more here. Mullings has 3 more carries, but he has also more than 200 yards rushing compared to Dono. His average is 8.1 per trip. Edwards, 4.5. Edwards had his own 41-yard touchdown rush by himself, but his name is on the marquee of the Michigan offense.
Yeah, and can I say, I think Donovan 2 years ago would have struggled more with this kind of flip because I think he was planning on being that guy. This year, of course, he's still a captain. He's a leader of this team. I saw him running out and celebrating for Mullings after he scored that game-winning touchdown. I think it'll be different, and we'll find his spot. And don't forget, he is a fantastic pass catcher as well. So there will be different ways to use Donovan as we move forward. But I think you're right. I don't know how you don't give Mullings most of the carries moving forward.
This seemed like Penn State all over again, didn't it?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I mean, Sharon has done this twice in a row now, where it's basically been all run and no pass. And no other coach in America with any success has been able to do that.
No.
Not in recent years.
It's wild. And, of course, that was a game where we had J.J. McCarthy. The problem, which we'll get into later, is it doesn't seem like we have the option to pass. Now, you could argue we didn't in that game because the ends in the Penn State game were coming off the edge so hard. But for a different reason, Sharon smashed again. And he said we were going to smash, and we did. And speaking of smash, Steve, one of the headlines of this game was, can USC handle the physicalness of the Big Ten? Here we go. This is game one of these West Coast teams really facing off against powerful Big Ten schools. The physical brutality of this game, the number of players, and I don't take this lightly because we talk about violence in my classes all the time, where there were guys taking knees like, is he okay? The number of players that went into their medical tent on the sideline, yes, Michigan players too. Some of them, looking at the film, were unlucky or a weird angle. But they felt it on that plane ride home, Steve. They were throbbing in pain. I'm telling you, it was a big time football game.
There will always be a debate between physicality and speed. USC got indoctrinated by probably the defining team of physicality in the Big Ten. You used to be able to say that about Wisconsin, at times Penn State, at times Ohio State, but right now, their first game in the Big Ten is Michigan's physicality, and it will probably be a little bit easier for them along the way, but that's a tough way to start.
They won't forget it. So, Steve, what does this mean? We talked about what if. I went into this game with very, very low hopes, lower than the Texas game, because we weren't sure. But the irony here is all our fears were kind of played out that we can't pass the ball, right? I mean, that was kind of the fear. Like, how can we possibly beat a good team if we can't throw the ball? We couldn't, and we won.
I just said that this is the second time Sharon Moore has done that. I would have told you 24 hours ago. It can't be done again. That was a unique thing that they did at Happy Valley, but it looks like they've done it again. So it means that Michigan's season isn't over.
Over?
It means Alex Orji is going to start again at quarterback. And it means the defense that we thought we could rely on in terms of carrying the offense can actually be relied on. There was some doubt through the first three games. And it also means that Michigan must furiously somehow devise a functional passing game in Big Ten play.
Was there any question in your mind that maybe they should put Warren in for that final
Absolutely.
drive?
So I stood next to Sam and I.
Guilty.
Thank you. All right. We're not alone in this.
Yeah.
I looked at the guys and I said, hey, I'm not telling them that they should do it. I said, what would you do if you're the coach on the sideline? You look like you really need to pass the ball. The fans in the stands certainly felt that way because some of them were leaving and booing. Who is your best passer when you're definitely in a passing situation?
Exactly. And that's how you would have justified it. It wasn't a change in quarterback. It was a situational move. He didn't do it. And I teach a leadership class, all of the reasons why you can't do that, right? For perception and for the locker room and everything. He made the right call. They won. But and some of you, I love it because people's minds tend to change, but I am guilty, Steve. I don't know if I would have done it. If you put it on me, I would have thought hard about it. Let's just put it that way. We need somebody who can throw the ball, seemingly.
If they continued to run the football and didn't have enough time to get across the field or the running game failed, whatever the case, USC wins the football game. There would be a mountain of armchair quarterbacks saying you should have benched Alex Orji with 4 minutes to go in the game. And there would be nobody that would be saying, you're wrong.
Right.
Nobody would have said that.
I mean, and he could have said, look, Orji's still the guy, but we got in a situation where I needed someone who can throw the ball.
And that would be the spin. It's incredible. So Michigan has gotten away with it, and there's going to be some tough tasks in the games ahead, but it looks like they now have bought some time, to be able to try to get a functional passing game going. It's been 4 weeks, but I think they know what kind of offense they're going to have now, and they need to do a little more trimming and fixing.
Yeah, I'm not done though, Steve, with Mr. Brightside because I want to we got to talk about a couple more things.
Okay.
Will Johnson's pick six. this is a guy playing at a different level. Like, looked effortless. Oh, come on. He got such a big jump on the ball, and then he was just gone. So I believe that's 3 he has now.
It
that
is,
record?
it is a program record, 3 pick sixes for Will Johnson.
With hopefully a full season to go at least. He's like Neo in The Matrix, Steve. He's like, he's just at a different level, and he's playing a different game. That's all.
Everything's a little bit in slow motion for him. Now, multiple reports from Sharon and Will himself talking with Jason Avant, the sideline reporter on the Michigan Flagship Network, says he was just held out of the game as a precaution. CBS speculated on television that he was taken in for x-rays. If he was all right to go, as we have been told, I find it hard to imagine he wasn't put back in the game under the circumstances. We'll see how this story develops during the week.
Yeah, and they remember. I mean, we missed the extra point, so we were only up 3.
Right.
All they needed was field goal. So yeah, I would think the same. So we'll see. What else?
I tell you, I think the team played almost mistake-free football in the first half. The defense didn't allow a first down in the first quarter and was allowing a yard per play midway through the second quarter. Michigan gambled a little bit on some fourth downs. One was in their own territory that could have dramatically changed the first half tone that was set if they weren't successful. And special teams, Tommy Doman put the Trojans in bad field position behind the student section.
I second the Tommy Doman with the punts because I've watched that guy, number 1, Branch. He is one of the fastest on-field players. I don't know what his 40 time is, but he can change the game in a second. And those punts pinned him back, really kept him he was a little bit of a factor on offense, but kept him away from being a factor on punts. So, Tommy Doman, you are a guardian of victory, as Harbaugh used to say. We can all laugh about it now, Steve, but there was that long SC run. Jair Hill makes TD saving tackle at the 1. They got a procedure penalty or something. Took him back 5.
The procedure penalty on a touchdown run by Woody Marks.
There you go. Yes. Okay. And so they took him back 5. Then we get the hit on the quarterback, a fumble. Kenneth Grant scoops and runs. It looks like he's looking around. I don't know if he was going to try to pitch it. The SC player makes an incredible play to steal the ball back. And then we all go to replay to see if he actually fumbled, which, of course, suddenly your mind was going, yeah, it's a fumble when KG's running with it. And then you go, wait, maybe.
5 seconds later, you hope it's an incomplete pass.
Yeah, his fingers are moving forward a little bit.
Because it would have been 4th down and they would have kicked a field goal.
And we all would have traded for that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was saying that myself. I said, I just hope it's an incomplete pass. They kick their field goal and they get their 3 because I didn't want a fresh set of downs like at the 26 or the 29-yard line. By the way, Kenneth Grant actually wasn't trying to pitch. He actually moved it from his inside arm to his outside arm away from the tacklers. I said, this is brilliant. I mean, he really did a good, but the USC defender went around Kenneth Grant and then just took the ball away from him. Just took the ball away. So again, Bo Schembechler would have said as soon as Kenneth Grant wouldn't have been allowed under Bo Schembechler to even scoop up the ball. He would just be told to dive on it.
Yeah, had they won, that probably would have been the big moment, and the replay on SportsCenter stealing the ball.
And, here's how the USC comeback was triggered when all seemed lost. Man, it would have been a big part of the storyline. Instead, I do have the USC reaction to this. Dan Weber from USCFootball.com. Here's his headline, Greg. Never, ever should USC be beaten by a team with this game plan. No self-respecting team should ever lose a game to someone who can't throw the football a lick.
A lick? Is he 100? A lick?
No excuse for that.
You're not fighting for a lick out there.
Yep.
See? No excuse for that. Go ahead.
You get the lead on a team that's one-dimensional and it's game over. And then he adds, kind of an insult when that's the only way Michigan football thought it could win this one. It's even worse that they were right.
Yeah, well, it was the only way Michigan could win this one. I mean, is there any? Yeah, guilty.
And then he goes on to ripping all the one-sided officiating calls. But yeah, I know.
That's our job, okay? Weber, Gomer. All right, okay. Steve, so sunny side down. I am very surprised. Now, we're probably getting a lot of bias because of who's on Twitter now, but but I do my mood index after the game where I say, where are you at mood-wise, and it's always usually a function of where the team is, and how they're playing. Boy, so many people in what are the 70s, which is kind of, this isn't Michigan. This is an unleaders and best we got major concerns. We do.
We have major concerns.
But this was right after the game. This was the final whistle. This went out. And usually you get that pop, right? And I tell you, man, the fan base, and this is why it's sunny side down, the fan base, a lot of them, I was really surprised. It usually doesn't surprise me what people say. I was surprised at this. I get it. I get if you look at the pieces and parts, we got concerns. But that was a big win. And the fact that we got it being so one-dimensional, to me, was a boost. You can tell it in my voice, Steve. We were both excited, and we still are. Not everybody.
You could argue that Michigan stole one. The idea in the 70s time scope, feeling unlike leaders and best. No, this is a time where you do feel like leaders and best because they won the game the way they did.
Yeah.
That makes you feel really proud. You can't argue with people's feelings a whole lot because it's their feelings.
I remember, so many people used to complain about, people would complain about Bo Schembechler, right, and his style and running. And there's a scene in The Big Chill where they're watching a Michigan game, and I think it's whatever the actor,
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, I think it's Goldblum. It's like, Bo. Stinking Bo, and
you're not supposed to choke it until the second half.
Yeah. Snark, man. But it is part of our nature. It came out. Donovan Edwards, hey, captain. I think he's going to have a great attitude. And someone on the touchdown run on final drive on BTN praised him for his patient running. I think he needs to be an impatient runner, Steve. And it's, far from me to tell Donovan Edwards how to run the ball. I see him making too many cuts and making too many nuanced moves. It served him well in big situations, like it did on that one play. He made a cut, got to freedom, or two. I think he needs to make one cut, one decision, one move, and that's it. And just let it be. Hit the hole.
It's funny. I'm going to get off on a small little rant on this, and I may be the only person who feels this way. There's a lot of cliches that are being thrown out in the broadcast world and in print. In high school football, you hit the hole as hard as you can, and you hope you break through and you go. In college football, they praise you for being a patient runner, waiting for the blocks to develop and the holes to open up. So having that little bit of delay is a good thing when you're in college football. And then in the NFL, there is none of that. You have to, like in high school, hit the hole. You don't even slow down. If you're going to do a cut and a dance, the cut dance has to be at 100% speed.
Yeah.
In the NFL, and you can see that.
I'd like to see him. I feel like Blake was more like that, where if he made a cut or a move, it was already past the line, or just to get those few extra yards. Hey, high hopes for Donovan. He's going to get a chance. I know it. So we'll see where it goes. The other downer, I saw Mason Graham take his helmet off in the final drive. I assume that wasn't because he was just getting a blow. Loveland was out for this game. We already mentioned Will Johnson. I mean, those are the guys all projected in the top 12 in the NFL draft next year. It's like it happens to be those three guys. I know there are other guys that are dinged up, but
Mason Graham did show up for the post-game press conference, and none of that was ever brought up, and there was nothing about him that looked like that he had any type of injury.
Good.
So
good. All right, I feel better. Passing game, Steve?
Oh, it was what I expected, and that's why I didn't pick Michigan to win the game. The only successful passes came at or behind the line of scrimmage. Now, for Alex Orji, he had a career day. I mean, he had 7 completions for out of 12 for 32 yards. His efficiency rating is 80.7. This puts you at the very bottom of the Big Ten, assuming you have enough passes to even qualify for that. Michigan's passing game is the worst in the Big Ten right now.
Yeah, it was worse than I thought it was going to be. I thought at least we'd hit a few tight ends here and there and a few plays and maybe – and they tried to do a couple things. They tried to flea flicker and things like that. They got to figure out a way to get the ball in people's hands.
Well, Colson Loveland wasn't playing, and that is your best receiver. Even though he plays a tight end, he is your best receiver on that offense, and you just haven't seen the other guys just be able to separate much from the defensive backs to be a viable option. So, again, we've talked about it before. I feel like we have two QB3s as your quarterback, and we don't have receivers who can get away from cornerbacks and safeties in coverage. And that's not a very good recipe, but it's up to the coaching staff to figure things out. One of the things you do is you throw a whole bunch of passes behind the line of scrimmage while they're still open. But at some point, they're probably going to have to throw more than 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, which is just something we haven't seen unless it's thrown out deep to try to keep the defenses honest.
All right, Steve, so after listening to all the pundits on CNBC talk about, is it going to be 25 points? Is it going to be 50? Finally, the Federal Reserve makes their decision, and it's a 50-point cut. Now we're going to stop talking about it, right, on CNBC? No, we're going to talk about it more. We're going to talk about the implications. 50%, was that too much? Was that too little? Is it signs the economy is slowing? I don't know. This is why we need people like Nick to help us sort through all this stuff. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's funny how the analysts will go in one different direction and then change direction like a running back, patiently waiting for the holes to develop and open up. They'll change their opinion. And if you watch it on a daily basis, your head will spin on what you should do. So Nick takes the longer approach. He looks at where you are at. He wants to look at your finances, and he wants to know about your plans into the future. And from there, you can have a stable, confident way of investing into the future. And his motto is retire with confidence.
It is indeed. You know, I had Coach Kevin Connery, men's lacrosse coach, into my leadership class, and he talks about asking the players and discussing with all of them your purpose, right? And if you understand what's really driving someone, it helps you build an authentic relationship, and then you can go forward from there and work together. And I feel like that's what Nick does, right? He gets to know you, he builds a relationship, and then creates a financial plan that works for you. Steve, where can they find Nick these days?
PeakWM.com. That's PeakWM.com. Back to the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark, and we did get some feedback from our listeners of the last podcast, especially about the Wolverines and the M-Den, and some creativity on Twitter that we saw.
It started with a question on Twitter, so I'm glad. Thank you for that, by the way. If you want to hit us on Twitter, easy to find, Steve Clark02, I'm M. Victors. In reaction to our discussion of the M-Den, we actually had Todd Schultz at a Smile Fixer on Twitter make a depiction of a new Walmart Wolverine Den storefront. And we say LOL a lot. I actually busted out laughing because what he did was he really fed off all our concerns. There was a weird Adidas logo up there, all kinds of different shades of maize. And I got to give the chef's kiss to Todd for that one. It was a beautiful, like Photoshop.
It was smooth,
image.
but I wasn't laughing. I was getting sick.
No, we were a little sick. And quickly, Steve, if you're a listener, you know, you can argue that the origins of this podcast now in its 51st episode really started at Steve and I hanging out at Oscar's, our neighborhood pub. Well, our friend, the owner, the namesake of that beautiful restaurant, Oscar Cotero, and his wife, Maria, they sold the restaurant, Steve. We both found out this week, and it's just a special place. It's not going away. I think they're even going to keep the Oscars name, but it's got a new owner, and I just got to say that we all know that these places are more than just places you can buy a beer or watch a game or get some food. They're part of our community. They support the community. There's so many people in our area that have events there and fundraisers, and just hats off to Oscar and all the people out there that create these special places that are part of our culture and our lives. And I love it. So, in fact, we had a rousing post-game show from the Big 1050s, Ira Weintraub, and their post-game show last night. And it was almost a dual kind of celebration of the win, but also a thank you to Oscar. Right. I thought it was beautiful.
We'll start to be able to buy him drinks at some point because they're sticking around, and in fact, they're kind of helping with the transition.
At least for a bit. But yeah, they're going to be around, so we love it. And shout out to Chad, our buddy, who during the post-game show started to a chant in the bar that says, "Play the song." And the song is that tequila song. It's probably called Tequila, but it's just the musical version of it, which signals what we're going to have to drink right after the show is over, of course. And that was a lot of fun. So nice job, Chad. By the way, Laura, our listener, Your husband was supposed to join us. You promised me he'd be there after a win, but I did not see Jeff there, so I'm calling him out on the podcast.
Do it.
Jay Banks, where were you, buddy? All right. Okay.
Next time.
Sights and sounds, Steve, other than Oscars. Dean Moji. Who am I talking about?
Yes.
My boss.
Your boss.
This was, and by the way, I am very in tune with what's going on in the School of Ed. I actually read the newsletters. She runs the School of Ed. Dean Elizabeth Moji actually conducted the band in the national anthem. And I actually ran into her. I go, what was that? What? I can't believe it. I go, was that a surprise? She goes, yeah, they kept it quiet. And so she wore the white gloves. And if you're like, big deal, Dooley, it'd be like you being at a game and your boss showing up and suddenly, being the PA announcer or at, in front of 110,000. It was a big deal. It lifted my spirits. I know she had a thrill. The honorary captains, the legend, Coach Hutch, which we talked about in this car, and Lloyd Carr. And when they announced LC, 110,000 fans, Steve, roared. It was deafening. But I thought that was a cool moment.
Absolutely.
Did you see that All-State? Now, you know that around the country, different people have sponsored the field goal net that they bring up, and it's actually printed on the net. It gets raised up. They digitized it onto the screen, onto the TV, and I don't know if they've been doing this for a couple games. I've never noticed it, but they made a digital depiction of a net overlaid on our net that actually swayed like it was an actual net. But of course, we don't have that. We don't allow that because we don't allow any permanent advertising in Michigan Stadium. So someone said we're going to digitize it. I don't know if someone signed off on this. I don't know.
I think CBS did it. I think it's a CBS deal.
Devils.
If you see them on CBS, you do it. Now, the funny thing is, the last couple of years, you would watch this with any Pistons or Red Wing game. It could be on the road, and they'll actually have signs on the court or on the boards on the ice that are different than the actual ads on the boards or on the court itself. And it's like, man, and it looks real. I mean, it looks
they
like
do a really good job.
They
do it in soccer games too, but yeah, so we can watch actually the Canadian broadcast of hockey games and then watch the US one. And the Canadian one's all Tim Hortons and all their Canadian stuff. And ours are Little Caesars Pizza and other stuff. Yeah, it's the same game. Even when they go to a close-up, they can do it behind the guys sometimes now. They're getting really good at having it, so it's wild. It's funny. The stripe out, Steve, where the odd and even sections wore different colors. I am a grump. I think the whole thing was stupid. I actually was half hoping it would fail. It did not. I was wrong. I was like Fonzie. I was
I was ruined.
What are you saying, Fonzie? I was wrong. It looked beautiful. I took a sweet photo from the photo deck of the stadium. You saw a bunch of overhead shots. They did a good job, even in the weird sections in the corners that splay out. Like, that's why, if you're wondering, why is that weird, why is it like a little upside down T there? Well, the sections actually go like that. So I thought it looked sweet.
It was.
Yeah.
I think Michigan learned from its mistakes is not to do a stripe out in November. I think the first time that they actually tried to do a stripe out or a maize out was in the middle of the coldest part of the season. And quite frankly, just nobody really has $200, $300 maize winter coats.
No.
They have the $15 maize shirts, but not the $300 maize coats. So
now, were people shamed, sitting in their seats? You're in the maize section, sir. Go to the M-Den, or whatever they call it now. Get your shirt. I wonder.
Ira noticed that in the pregame show, not only for our show, but he was walking around at other tailgates. It seemed like people were congregating in the same colors of where they were wearing. So not only were they supposed to sit in the same section, they were just naturally talking with people wearing the same colored
hilarious.
Shirts.
Well, that's
like what kind of sheep are we?
So there was a phenomenon that they studied with the movie The Planet of the Apes. Do you know about this? So they would break and everyone had all their makeup on, and they found all the people depicting the apes would sit together, and then the humans would sit together. There are these national signals in our ape brains, to congregate with birds of a feather. Crazy stuff.
That was kind of happening.
The crowd was pretty strong.
As much as I had talked about earlier on about them booing and leaving late in the game, they were a factor. You and I sat in the open area for the first quarter of the game or so. I couldn't leave because I was getting superstitious. But they were loud, and they forced 4 false start penalties.
Yeah, that you felt them. You felt, and again, not just with the Lloyd Carr, but through the game. All right, the Big Ten flag tradition. What am I talking about? And this, Steve, I would say this is something only Greg cares about, but I got 2 different texts before I went into the stadium with people complaining. And what am I talking about? When we start the Big Ten season, actually, we've done this since the stadium opened in 1927, is fly the banners of the other Big Ten schools. Michigan State actually has all the flags of all the Big Ten schools when they come out with their band, right? Mm-hmm. So the way we honor the other Big Ten schools was flags around the stadium. So they did not have them. They had different colored maize and blue Michigan flags today. So what happened? Either they forgot or they remembered too late.
Possibility.
Or they said, screw it.
I like that better.
Because we only have 16 flag poles because we have 18 teams. So you need at least, if we're going to have one of each, we need 17 flag poles at a minimum, assuming we're not going to have one for Michigan.
No.
What would Dooley do? I would have remembered. I would have done something about it. I would have cared. I would have reconfigured it. There's 4 flagpoles on either side of each scoreboard, 16 flagpoles. I would have redone it, made 5, had 20, had all 18 teams, and maybe 2 Big Ten flags or have a couple extra Michigan flags or something. If you want to get crazy, Steve, now this is where people are going to throw tomatoes at me.
I'm ready.
Add Notre Dame and add Johns Hopkins. Why? Because they are affiliate members of the Big Ten through hockey and lacrosse. I said it. No, you're not going to play him. Okay.
No,
we're not going to
do that. In fact, I like the idea of removing one Big Ten flag, just in general. Maybe you're just angry at them, and you can just remove.
And
a
you
flag.
have to figure out which one it is.
We're mad at you, and so we're taking your flag down.
Who are you picking? No, we can't pick Ohio State. That's too obvious. So who are we picking? We can't pick Michigan State.
Michigan never wanted Michigan State in the Big Ten anyway, so maybe they could have their flag removed. Maybe they remove the flag of the team that brings the least amount of revenue to the Big Ten Conference.
Yes. I think you should order them by how much they serve us through the Big Ten media new contract. Sorry, Northwestern, you're gone. Okay. It's Jug Week, Steve. We got to preview the Gophers. For those of you who wanted to attend the observatory in person on Thursday, I'm going to be speaking on college football history and then do my little spiel on the Jug. It is full, and there's a wait list, so you're out of luck. But if you go to mvictors.com, you can still see it live. They're going to live stream it, and then I believe the recording will be available, and you can check it out if you want. So that'll be fun.
What time is that on Thursday?
Believe it starts at 7 p.m. at the observatory.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. All right. Well, no, that's good to know. I was going to ask you. It's like there's only like 80 seats or so. I was like, maybe I shouldn't go in case there's other people that want to go, and we already know the answer to that. I'm not going.
That's right. Well, Steve, I know somebody who might be able to squeeze you in if you really want to go. But you're right. I do want people who are ultimately interested in it. And we're going to see, I think we're going to see an interesting slice of Ann Arbor. The people who always go to these things, no matter what the topic is, and they'll go, let's see what this guy has to talk about. So it'll be funny.
Lunch Lady Doris.
Yes, because I am used to, when I speak to people our age and older, it's at alumni clubs, and literally they cheer in the middle of my history talks and laugh and all that. I'm going to be reaching a few new people, I think, in this one.
That sounds like the way PJ Fleck wants to conduct his team meetings.
Oh, my God. So tell me about Minnesota. Are we going to retain the Jug, Steve? What do we have to worry about here?
Minnesota, 2-2. Back-to-back shutouts versus Rhode Island and Nevada, for what that's worth. They only scored 17 points in a loss to North Carolina, who surrendered 70 to James Madison's Signetti-less Dukes football team. And then they lost the other night to Iowa 31-14 at home. Minnesota, like Michigan, they're a physical football team. And running back Darius Taylor is the headliner to me. And he had what I thought was his first pedestrian-like game. But this guy from Walled Lake Western, I believe, will have a huge chip on his shoulder because Michigan chose to recruit Cole Cabana out of Dexter instead. And this is a guy, before Saturday, it seemed like every time he was playing, he was rushing for like 150 or more yards, closer to 200. Their new quarterback is interesting, Max Brosmer, probably the best quarterback that Minnesota's ever had since Tanner Morgan when they had their 10-win team. All FCS champion, first team, second team type of quarterback. And yeah, he makes Minnesota's offense a little bit better. They're obviously going to have a better passing game than the Wolverines at this point. Defensively, they have been stout, but boy, they were gashed by 8 explosive runs by the Iowa Hawkeyes. And Caleb Johnson for Iowa, by the way, is the nation's leading rusher. But they gave up 8 explosive runs. So of the Michigan games coming up and where I would rank them, I think this is probably the easiest game left for Michigan that they have until they play Northwestern at the end of the year. Because Washington, Illinois, Michigan State, and Indiana are no longer the gimmies they once were. And all of those teams are tracking above initial expectations. I think most people in the summer had them projected not to make a bowl game. And they all look like they're going to make it and then some.
Yeah, they sure do. So we got to get this one is what you're telling me. Again, you mentioned PJ Fleck. I just don't buy his act. I'm not sure who he is. If he's your neighbor, is he just an intense but really nice guy down, or is he a total jerk? You know, and I don't know if his players buy it, if I don't buy it. And I think we know who some of these guys are. I think we know who Jim Harbaugh is. You know, I make that point. I don't know about him. All my you're a phony sensors are flicking. But, Steve, I will be live at the rarefied desk in Joe's garage on the pregame show before this one.
Tell me
in the
more.
morning.
I missed the meeting.
Steve, well, maybe I'm taking your place. I don't think so. I will be by. I'm going to be talking about the Jug, and I'm going to be doing a live version of This Week in Michigan Football History, just sharing a little bit of history about the Jugs.
Love it.
It'll be fun. How about a quick whip around the Big Ten? Your favorite team did it again, Steve.
Nebraska did it again, Greg. They ripped the heart out of their fans again.
Again.
If you hadn't seen the game Friday night, because I know some people have a life outside of football, here's a sequence of events. The game's tied. There's 3 minutes to go. Freshman quarterback Dylan Raiola, who, by the way, is the real deal, misses on a touchdown pass that arguably was his easiest throw he could have made all night. The very next play, the Cornhuskers miss a 39-yard field goal, and it goes into overtime. Illinois gets the ball first. They score in 2 plays. Bing, bang, boom, up by 7. What does Nebraska do in its 2 plays? Well, they take 2 sacks, Greg, and it's 3rd and 42 from the Nebraska side of the field. And then Raiola takes a 3rd sack on 4th down, and it's game over before it even starts. The Huskers, again, lose another game right when it seems like they're about to win. It's got to be mental at this point, and it just carries over from coaching staff to coaching staff, from seniors to freshmen who become seniors to dropping it down to more freshmen. This absolutely is stunning to me, Greg. Nebraska hasn't scored a point in their last 8 overtime games. Not a single point.
In their last 8 overtime games, they have not scored anything. Not a field goal.
So needless to say, they've lost, all of them.
By definition.
Nothing, okay? But even worse than not scoring a point, they're negative 15 in total yards going back to those 8 overtime losses.
Unbelievable.
Negative 15 total offense. Death, taxes, and Nebraska choking away wins, Greg.
I love it.
That is Nebraska. And for somebody who has a grudge, that's me. I'm not forgetting 1997. I'm not forgetting Scott Frost, Trev Alberts, and the rest of them.
Someone's metaphorically removing the Nebraska flag from the stadium in Steve's mind. Okay.
That is the way it is for me.
Yeah.
And I'm here for it. I am here for Nebraska, but their fan base, they're getting kicked in the nads every time the game is close.
I will say that Raiola is the real deal, though. Like he can really play. And on the other side, Illinois looks pretty good.
So I had a whole bunch of notes about how great this game is and how Luke Altmaier has turned it around as quarterback for Illinois. The Brett Bielema's team actually seems like they're being well coached at the time. I just threw it out because it all came down to the way Nebraska handles their business at the end of games, which they can't. Now to Illinois, 4-0. That's a concern. They host Michigan on October 19th. Both Nebraska and Illinois looked really good, but as Scott Frost said, it's the same movie for them. 25 straight losses to ranked teams, 8-31 in one-possession games dating back to 2018. Their fans, by the way, will tell you the refs cost them the game like they usually do, and a few certainly didn't go their way, but not as many as you would think. Lastly, Michigan State. They lose a statement game to Boston College. Similar in the way that MSU beat Maryland on the road late with a big pass, it was the Eagles cornerback, Tony Castellanos, no relation to Nick, by the way, threw a 42-yard touchdown pass with about a minute and a half left for the 4-point win. Aiden Childs with 3 interceptions. This guy seems like he has a lot of potential, Greg, at QB for Michigan State, but his play is a bit spotty. He's turned it over a lot. Sort of like Davis Warren has turned it over a lot, but he's also made some big plays.
The net of all the Big Ten right now is that a lot of teams where we felt like we were clearly ahead of, we might not be. And that's the downside there. But they're going to be big games for us. Circle Illinois, circle Indiana, those road trips for sure. So more important to get this one on Saturday and retain the jug. Quickly around the nation, Steve, Michigan USC got a lot of attention, but there's another one.
No, it was surprised. I thought this was going to be the game of the week and talked about like ad nauseum through Monday, but Colorado won't seem to go away. Shedeur Sanders completes a Hail Mary as time expires to force overtime against Baylor, a game that they would eventually win. And the two-man game of Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, he didn't actually catch the Hail Mary. He was a decoy. Those two guys should be looked at as Heisman Trophy candidates, even though they're not going to win as many games. And then the mere story of just Arch Manning starting ahead of an injured Quinn Ewers apparently is the biggest story of the weekend. They beat Louisiana Monroe 51-3 as expected, but it's Arch Manning, so you have to write about him.
Do we have time for things only Steve cares about?
Nothing about things I only care about, but we have time for something only you, Greg.
Okay, you put me on the spot. Fine. COVID did a lot of things, and it changed our society. One of the things is people are doing like remotes from home and things like that in their home office on ESPN and on news channels and all that, and we're just used to it, right? Well, one thing I've noticed that really pisses me off, and this is definitely something I only care about.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Everybody knows nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody cares.
I care.
Then do whatever you want.
Is that all these ads, if there's a celebrity, they're not in the ad with the other actors, okay? If there's two celebrities, they cut them separately, and they blend it all together. And you're like, well, how do you know this, Dooley? I can just tell, and I don't know what it is, but it drives me nuts. It started with Matt Stafford in the AT&T commercial with Lily. I started to go, he's not there. Lily's not there. Like, what's going on? Watch the Sam Elliott and Gronk USAA commercial. And they do a thing where they flip the camera and they show a blurry back of the head, like where they depict it. And they mesh these commercials together. LeBron and Kevin Hart, they're sitting in those two chairs. They cut them separately. If you look at them, they don't quite look at each other right. They try to do the shadows and everything. And then those Aflac commercials with Coach Prime and Saban and the Duck, they're definitely not in the office or anywhere they've shown them. Even just look at the headshots, look at all that. I don't know why. It pisses me off. And again, this is clearly something that only Greg cares about. And one of you is listening to this and going, oh, yeah, I noticed that too. But someone else is going to start watching it and go, God damn, Dooley, I wish you wouldn't have told me that. Things only Greg cares about.
Sometimes, Greg, it looks like they're giving each other the side eye.
Yeah.
In these commercials, they're okay, pretend you're looking at this spot over here and it might be 45 degrees, but in the actual commercial, they put them maybe at 60 degrees.
Yeah.
So they're not actually looking at each other in the eye. And it doesn't flow like a conversation. It's kind of mechanical.
Yeah.
Greg?
It drives me crazy.
It's so great to see you on the other side of the glass.
Yes. Right. And then your head is blurry if they try to no, they're together and they try to fool you. Don't be fooled.
It's like
I know you don't care, though. No one cares about this.
Greg, it's like I always say when I see you face to face.
Right. Yeah, right. Anyway, they're fooling you. Don't be fooled. Don't buy their products. I'm just kidding. All right, Steve, are we done?
We are done.
Are we still national champions?
Don't be fooled, Greg. Michigan football are the reigning national champions. Go Blue, Greg.
Go Blue.